What's going on, Tamers? It's me, East, and man, I am just riding high on Digimon card game news right now. I think like right now in time is probably the best time to be a Digimon card game player. There's so much good stuff happening, and if you don't know what I'm talking about, Bandai recently did a strategy presentation for the next year on Digimon, where they're going to be releasing their plans, so forth and so on. I did an entire video summarizing all of that, so if you want to take a look and know more about what's happening, what's going to be happening in the next year or so, take a look at that video on the channel. Probably one of the biggest announcements from that presentation was that they're going to be unifying the game across all regions in the world, which means we're all going to be on the same page at the same time from the start of next year, which I believe is BT20, that release. And if you think that's amazing, that's just the tip of the iceberg. Go and check the video out to see all the amazing stuff that's happening in Digimon over the course of the next 12 months. But I digress. This video is about the second week asterisk of the Japanese meta report for the BT16 beginning observer set, and this one is going to be a bit of a special report. That's because this past weekend we actually had the Japanese Nationals Digimon tournament to choose the top 2 representatives from Japan going to the World Championship later this year. And we only get a Japanese Championship once a year, so might as well dedicate this video to that entire event. So to set the stage, since September, the locals and regionals have been happening here in Japan, and players have been playing all around the country in their own local shops, as well as larger regional events to qualify for this 32-man bracket here at the end of the year. This event was using the BT16 set with the current and updated restricted list in effect, which means this tournament is just the current BT16 environment that everybody in Japan and Asia are playing in. So with that said, let's take a look at this event's results, a couple of key takeaways, and a close look at some of the decks that topped in the Japanese Nationals tournament. So if you saw last week's meta report, then you know that BT16 really feels like a breath of fresh air from the past, where we had the centralized Apocalypse meta, or the like 4 or 5 purple decks that were all pretty much running the same lower end. And so with some of those cards in those decks either restricted or choice restricted, we finally have some really nice diversity in the game that carries over into the top 32 of this event here. So the results format here is going to be a little bit different from our usual videos, where we would normally talk about event tops and then how many event tops a deck had. In this case, we're going to talk about how many players in the top 32, or the 32-man bracket for this event, brought X deck. Numemon, just a very powerful deck overall. We'll take a look at a couple of lists in a little bit, so stay tuned for that. The story that this chart doesn't tell is that within the vaccine decks that were brought, most of them focus on actually using the armor cards from the Magnamon armor and the Rapidmon armor decks. So while there was one person who was mostly focused on like vaccine and angels, for the greater part of all the vaccine decks that were brought, they had a mixture of Rapidmon and Magnamon alongside some Angel stuff as well. With the release of BT16, Yellow really does have a fantastic toolbox of cards to pull from, and so you can kind of fit your style whether you want to be a bit more aggressive, a bit more defensive, what have you, with just the Yellow Vaccine deck itself. As we drop down past this chasm, however, at the 2 players, like I said before, Magnamon Armor was really popular, Imperial Dramon as well as Finner Lugamon. I love the way that the new Finner Lugamon works. It's a very powerful OTK deck, however, it is hard to pilot. Getting the OTK right in the sequencing is new with some of the BT16 cards, but it makes it so worth it when you actually pull it off. And then as we drop down to the decks that were only represented by one player here, we have Greymon Gaming. Again, Greymon card game, it wouldn't be a finals without these guys, Agumon, Greymon, and or Shine Greymon. The Sylphimon deck represented here is actually a surprise to me. I didn't really rate this deck so powerfully, but it seems like somebody thought differently, and I'd love to take a look at this list. Unfortunately, I could not find it. Moving along here, we have the pure Rapidmon armor deck here that doesn't feature like the Patamon vaccine stuff. Just totally focus on the Terriermon and Lopmon cards with like St. Gargamon or Mega Gargamon Ace and the Rapidmon X Antibody. Tyrant Terriermon was a deck that I thought was going to be a lot more popular in this event, and I'm really surprised to see it only one person brought. With the power to create a semi-impervious 20,000 DP wall that can redirect attacks into itself, it really does shut down a lot of stuff in the game right now. And again, I'm really shocked to see that it wasn't brought by more players. What I am happy to see, though, is the Dorogoromon here. This is a deck that I've been messing with all week. I've been trying out tons of different builds, from SLC to Finner Lugamon, and again, I cannot find this list for the life of me, but I would love to take a look at it, not only for you guys, but also for my own personal deck building preferences. To round out these results, I didn't expect to see Leviamon or Belphemon here, but this is a nice little addition, and this Leviamon deck actually did really well. It actually had a great conversion to top 8, and we'll take a look at that in just a moment. So now what we're taking a look at is the top 8 for this event, and we see 3 players, 3 out of these 7 players who brought Numemon making it to the top 8. The conversion rate for Magnamon Armor is 100%. 2 players brought it, 2 players got it in the top 8, so fantastic to those guys. And then we see 2 players of the Vaccine Yellow decks also make it through here as well. I didn't mention on the last graphic, but actually 9 players brought Vaccine Yellow for this event, and seeing 2 players get through the top 8 seems like the numbers work out. Yeah, that seems about right. And then finally, the one Leviamon player here sneaking his way into top 8. Look, if you're a purple player and you've been down since you've seen the restricted list updates, then before you toss your deck into the trash, just wait and take a look at this list here because it might give you a little bit of hope. So now with the top 32 and the top 8 out of the way, let's take a look at some of those decks that I see topped in this event, going from 5th to 1st place. So we're going to take a look at the top 6 decks for this event, and unfortunately I wasn't able to find the last 2. They just weren't posted anywhere I could find them. Again, if you guys on Twitter or X or wherever know where they are, either hit me up there or in Discord or somewhere so I can post them up somewhere so folks can find them. So the first 5th place deck is going to be Magnamon X. With the addition of the new Magnamon X Antibodies deck has some pretty insane walling potential. Whenever a security is peeled off on either side on any turn, he gets to activate his on-evolve effect. His on-evolve effect being get plus 3000 DP until the end of your opponent's turn, and become unaffected by effects until the end of your opponent's turn, and then unsuspend. So you're essentially looking at a 15,000 DP wall that can block, has armor purge, and isn't affected by your opponent's effects for an entire turn. And while 15,000 is a big number, it is not impossible for a lot of decks to get over. So in some cases, you have to kill Digimon that are over 15,000 on your turn using some of the new BT16 Vmon cards to give you plus 2,000 DP on your own turn. Additionally, the Magnamon that was included in the Terriermon Double Typhoon starter deck is also represented here with 4 of. Just a fantastic security effect, being able to Digivolve 1 whenever you check on security, and then you can Digivolve him onto a Vmon on the board somewhere. And while I will say going from your Magnamons to your Magnamon X Antibody is a bit costly at cost 5 here, you do have the option of using the Awakening of the Golden Knight to reduce that cost by 3 and just Digivolving using the option card here. Additionally, if one of your Magnamon X Antibody ended up in the trash and you want to get it back to your hand, you can also have this card checked in security and get it back that way. Some cute little text in this deck. The first one going to be 3 copies of Death Exmon, just in case your opponent tries to go wide to get over your 1 wall. They try to go with like 4 or 5 Digimon to make a big swing and then finish the game using numbers rather than, another big Digimon. He's there to clean that up. Additionally, you've got the Yugioh, which is really interesting, giving your Digimon with X Antibody, I'm taking a look at the Magnamon X here in this case, reboot and alliance. So being able to swing and then hit for 2 or more and then reboot so you can block your opponent's Digimon in the following turn. It's pretty standard for this deck to run a couple copies of Blinding Ray, because in the case that you cannot hit your opponent's security to reduce the security to gain the Magnamon X's effect on your own turn, you can just burn one of your own security using the Blinding Ray, get 2 memory, and then your Magnamon X Antibody's effect procs anyway. That's also pretty common for the armor decks in general to just run a couple copies of Heaven's Judgment. If for whatever reason you need to get rid of a big Digimon on board, Heaven's Judgment is probably the way to do that. Another nice little added benefit is that because Heaven's Judgment hits 6,000 for every color you have on board, and Magnamon X Antibody has 3 colors, you're essentially hitting 24,000 on the board. The other option here is to actually just use the effect on in a wide scale as well, where you can just hit multiple things for 6,000, or mixing and matching, whatever you want. Final Zubagon Punch is a really interesting tech for this deck, because if your Magnamon X already has its effect procced, you can throw a Final Zubagon Punch on it, pump it up to 18,000 or more, and then it gets blocker reboot and security attack +1. So in the same vein, you're also hitting for multiple security checks, like the Yugioh card here. And also, while we're on the subject of Tamers, I think I forgot to talk about the TK. TK, just a way to basically use your security as a second hand in case you are having trouble finding your Magnamon X's in the deck and they might be in security. He's a way to grab those out of there. If you saw last week's video, then you know that this deck is pretty popular right now, and with a 100% conversion rate in the top 32 to top 8, you can see why. Tying at 5th place was also the other Magnamon armor deck as well. This one is cool because you get to see the duality of builds, where the previous build was focused on getting to your Magnamon X and then hitting hard with multiple security checks over the course of a turn, where this one is a bit more low to the ground and also a bit more aggro focus. The first example here being the 4 copies of the Jamming Vmon that you see here, one of the guys from BT3, very old set, but also a fantastic card just over time. Additionally, we see a couple copies of Ukomon, 4 copies of the brand new BT16 Ukomon, who lets you search whenever Digimon are pulled out of Raising, and then 1 copy of the promo movie Ukomon, who just lets you gain a memory when something comes out of Raising. The Zudomon Ace inclusion here is actually kind of nice because you have so many level 4s. Most of the deck is going to be operating at the level 4 level except your level 6s. The new Double Typhoon included Magnamon here does have the ability on Digivolve to trash Digivolution cards, so that's one way to get your opponent source stripped a little bit, and then you can finish them off with the Zudomon Ace whenever they try to attack. Again, one of the worries that you have with this deck is actually the opponent going very wide, and so you have to have a couple copies, in this case 2 copies of Death Exmon, just to clean up those wide boards. I love the idea of the 1 copy of Omegamon, just the blitz to finish the game in case your Magnamon X finishes all the security off and you just need 1 more hit. He's the way to do that. In the previous deck, we did see the TK Tamer here, and I said that the Davis Tamer was probably a bit more standard, just because it allows you to search through your deck a little bit more, again, being able to grab a blue or green card. And unfortunately, this deck doesn't have any green cards, so you're only really getting the blue card off of it, but again, Memory Setter is also good. And then we also have the promotion Rui Tamer, which is kind of surprising here. Again, just another way to gain memory over the course of a turn. Because your Magnamon X Antibody Evolve is typically going to be really, really expensive, you see this deck doesn't run any copies of Awakening of the Golden Knight, you're going to have to make up the memory somewhere else, and it's going to be that Ukemon and the Rui Tamer here. You also see, rather than going with the split of memory boost and training cards, this deck's going to run full memory boost just to dig through the deck as fast as possible. Keep in mind you're only grabbing your blue cards, your blue Digimon cards off of this, so the yellow option cards and the black option cards and the white Digimon and training Tamers are off limits. And then like before, we see a couple copies, 3 in this case of Blinding Ray, 2 copies of the Heaven's Judgment, and then 2 copies of Final Zubagon Punch like we saw before. And so if you're an aggressive player like me, and you like to hit hard, hit fast, then this version of Magnamon X is something you can vibe with. Next up, we have the 2 decks that tied for 3rd place. The first one here going to be Numemon. Again, a very aggressive, low-to-the-ground deck that is able to just recycle cards very quickly from the trash and the hand, and just keep your board filled at all times. Although it is aggressive, it does contain a couple copies of Floodgates. In the case of the 2 Chumon here, also the 3 Chikurumon here to stop your opponent from reducing Digivolve costs. I think most of the folks I've talked to pretty much agree that both Ukemons, the promo and the BT16 Ukemon, are required at 4 of in this deck. Just keep it very low to the ground and keep the pressure on constantly, getting memory off of the promo one and getting card draw off of the BT16 version. The level 4s for this deck are a nice little mix of resource, defense, and offense, where in defense here you've got the Getemon, who lets you discard a card and give an opponent's Digimon security attack -1. You also have the other Getemon here from BT11, where you can discard a card and then draw 2. And additionally, you also have the Numemon here from the BT14 set that was released alongside some of the Digi-Police cards that can slot a Satsuki Tamer up underneath it, and then one of your Digimon gets rushed for the turn. Because the deck has a way to play lots and lots of Numemon through effects, you can just get this guy down, hold the Satsuki Tamer in your hand, and then slot her in and get the final attack for game. He's kind of like a Blitz in this case. The BT15 Numemon X Antibody is a demonic card, letting you play a Numemon named card from your trash whenever he's deleted. And that includes the level 6 Platinum Numemon, so you just get a level 6 down for basically nothing. He's a 0 cost Digivolve off of a Numemon without X Antibody in his name, so just another way this deck can keep aggression going no matter what. Speaking of the X Antibody cards, the Monzaimon X Antibody lets you fill up your board and reduce opponent's DP at the same time. The Digivolve effect allowing you to play a Numemon from your hand onto the board, and then the Alternate effect, once per turn, you can reduce an opponent's Digimon's DP by 2,000 for every Digimon you have. He's a way to scare opponents from attacking on their own turn, while also cleaning up the board on your turn. I'm going to go a little out of order here, but I'm going to skip over most of this stuff to go to the Platinum Numemon here. So remember, Platinum Numemon is going to be able to be played off of your Numemon X Antibody whenever it's destroyed. And whenever you play him or Digivolve into him, you can trash a card, gain 2 memory. So in some cases, you can go memory positive or steal a turn with this guy. And then on a deletion, you can play level 5 Numemon or Monzaimon card from your hand without paying the cost. One of the cards you might want to play with the Platinum Numemon's effects is going to be the Monzaimon from the Rising Wind Reboot booster, or Resurgent booster. I'm not sure what they called it in English actually. On play, he's going to let you slot a Numemon up under your trash up under him, and then you gain 2 memory. Again, another way to steal turns, or just increase your own memory during your own turn. And then he's also going to give an opponent's Digimon -3k and security attack -1 until the end of their turn. What's really nice is that when you Digivolve over this guy, he actually gives you security attack +1. So this deck has a bit more offense in that regard once you get to your level 6s. And then on the defensive side, we've got a couple copies of Were Monzaimon, in this case 3 copies, where he can Digivolve something on the opponent's side of the board, and then also you can put a Numemon from your trash up under him as a source, and then you can stop all of your opponent's cost 5 or lower Digimon from attacking. A great way, in case your opponent is also low to the ground with an aggressive deck, to stop them from going in for a turn. And then like the Monzaimon before, in Inheritance he has security attack +1, so again you get to keep the offense in this case. The top end of this deck is just terrifying. You've got a couple copies of the Valkyremon Ace, who's kind of like a pseudo Shine Greymon Ruin mode. You also have a copy of Ruin mode in this deck just in case. Additionally, you've got 2 copies of the Venusmon as well to kind of shut off effects on your opponent's side of the board for a single turn. And then, of course, 1 copy of the Death Xmon in case your opponent goes wider than you do, in the rare case that happens. I mentioned before we do run a couple copies of the Numemon from BT14, and because you need the Satsuki Tamer to give something rush with his effect, you see 2 copies of Satsuki Tamer in here. And again, 2 copies of the Rui Tamer. These are the promos from the movie, and surprisingly enough, 1 copy of the X program card. I guess it's kind of like a nuke to non-X Antibody cards out there, but it feels like so many cards are X Antibody right now, this card might be hard to play. And so the second deck that tied for 3rd place at the Japan National Championships is Leviamon. Now, if you were a fan of the Anubismon cards and you're really bummed to see those cards hit on the restricted list, well, good news, this deck actually uses those cards as a second game plan in case Leviamon doesn't work out. So you see a single copy of the Anubismon here alongside a couple copies of Mervomon. We've got a couple copies of the Cerberusmon X Antibody, the Dobermon X, the Garurumon cards, so you can get there very quickly if you need to, and then the Ignitemon here as well to help out with the Minervamon effect. The Leviamon game plan here being the cards using the Octomon as well as the Dragomon you see here, both forcing your opponent to play Digimon. In the case of Octomon, he plays the Fujitumon token, and then Dragomon here forces your opponent to play Digimon from their trash. They don't get any effects, but because they do play it by an effect, it'll proc your Leviathan X Antibody. And you see this deck does run 4 copies of the X Antibody Proto form. So the idea here is that once you have the X Antibody card up underneath one of your Digimon, and then you use a Dragomon to force him to play something out, you're going to immediately be able to evolve into your Leviathan X from the trash for free. Leviathan X is horrifying at Security Tech +2. The Dragomon Inheritance gives him Piercing, and when Digivolve, he allows you to destroy a Tamer on your opponent's side of the board, level 3, level 5, and a level 7. And then if you have the option card, 7th Lightning, in effect as well, you can put this card from your trash in underneath your deck and then pop a level 4 and a level 6. And of course, you've got the 1 copy of Shine Greymon Ruin Mode because you're running purple, and why not? This whole segment is just a very long-winded way of me saying to purple players directly, quit crying, you guys got gas. And then in second place at the Japan Nationals is going to be another Numemon deck. Now, this one is pretty similar to a lot of the other ones. I think what is interesting is some of these splits. So the one Q-Tech this deck does have that the others don't is the inclusion of the BT5 Starmons, back from the Lord Nightmon times, being able to reduce a Digimon's DP on your opponent's side of the board for every Digimon you have. Some of the splits with the Floodgates are a little bit higher here with the 4 copies of the Chumon, the 3 copies of the Chikurimon, and this guy feels like he has the heart of the cards because he only has a single copy of the Warumonzaimon we talked about before as a defensive card, as well as 1 copy of Chimeramon. All the Numemon and Getemon cards are level 4 focused, so this guy is a perfect target for those guys if you got 2 on the board, and typically you are going to have 2 on the board because you're going to go super wide. Great way to reduce your opponent's Digimon's DP, buff your own, get to level 5 for free, get some card draw, and potentially go into level 6 here. I don't know if I mentioned it before, but they are running a couple copies of the Numemon from the Reboot Booster, who gives one of your Digimon blocker and inheritance. So in this case, you can have a little bit of defense on the board. You can start trading in forces between you and your opponent if they go wide as well. Again, just another very solid Numemon list. And so we finally made it to the winner of the Japan National Championships, who's also going to be running a Numemon deck, but this one has a bit of a different spice to it. We saw all the other decks previously running a black base in order to get the Floodgates and use their effects off of the Tsunomon. However, this one's going to be running a purple lower end with the eggs of the Puchimeramon from BT15, letting you discard a card that's level 5 or higher and then draw 2. Additionally, we've got a couple copies of Gabumon because you can't keep a good Gabumon down even with the restricted list. He's really similar to the movie promo Okumon here, giving you 1 memory as well. He just doesn't get to hatch an egg. The middle of this deck is pretty similar to what we've seen before, but there are some very cute little techs at the upper end, especially the 1 copy of the Rapidmon X Antibody. Because this deck does have a way to get to a level 5 yellow Digimon, you can Digivolve into the Rapidmon X off of that, rest all of your opponent's Digimon, and then give them minus, blanket 4k, and then attack after that. This is so cheeky, but I like it because it fits in so well with all the other DP reductions in this deck. This is a perfect fit. You'll probably notice this deck also doesn't run any copies of Venusmon, but instead runs 4 copies of Valkyremon Ace here. Always having the threat of the Ace and the blanket minus 5k really makes your opponent hesitate to swing. Speaking of other 4-ofs, lots of the other decks maybe like ran 1 or 2 copies of the Numemon here. This one runs 4. He always wants to make sure he has that final swing for game, and he's got the 2 Sasuke Tamers alongside that to make sure it always happens. The other Tamer in this deck going to be 3 copies of the Louis Tamer here from the movie promo, and then finally right at the bottom here, the 2 copies of the X Antibody Proto form, in case you want to Digivolve into any of the X Antibody cards in the deck at a reduced cost, and being able to heal a little bit once that Digimon is destroyed. And so that's going to bring our Japanese Nationals Digimon coverage to a close. Hope you guys enjoyed this very special, also very chunky meta report video for this week. And if you want to actually take a look at the videos themselves of the players playing, they did do some recordings of that event, and I'm going to be taking a look at them later on this week on my stream. If you folks want to hang out and watch alongside with me for some great Digimon action over here in Japan, do me a favor and either subscribe to the channel here or follow me on X or Twitter, whatever you want to call it, and you'll know when I go live there this week. Finally, I want to give a big shout out and a big hearty thank you to the folks who have become channel members and supported me here on YouTube. If you folks want to become channel members, for $5 a month, you get access to all my videos early. The proceeds right now from channel memberships are all going towards Digimon locals around the world. I'll be giving them to tournament and event organizers out there who are trying to make their locals better, as well as streaming their events or recording their events so that you guys have more Digimon content to watch. So if you haven't become a channel member yet, I implore you to become one. That way you'll get early access to my content, as well as it will help other people create more Digimon content for you guys to watch in the future. Anyways, folks, it's been a long day. I'm sure you guys have seen the sun go up and down behind me as I've been recording this, so I'm going to get out of here. Before you get out of here, do me a favor, hit the subscribe button, and I'll catch you in the next one. Take care.